Day 14. The morning began with a different kind of sound. Not mortars, not artillery, but steady chopping echoing faintly from the northern ridges. They are clearing fields of fire now, cutting away brush that would block machine gun arcs. At first light, the valley looked tired. I could see fewer men moving outside the Royal Lao bunkers. The artillery crews stayed close to their pits. Even from this distance, the posture has changed. No more relaxed pacing between positions. Everyone moves with purpose. Around 6:15, mortars struck again, heavier than yesterday. Not a massive barrage, but sustained, perhaps 15 to 20 rounds over 10 minutes. The impacts walked across the western edge of the valley and then reached toward the center. One round landed close enough to an artillery pit that I saw men dive flat. The Royal Lao guns answered quickly and in larger volume than before. The entire valley echoed with outgoing fire. For several minutes, it sounded like control had been reasserted. No immediate enemy response, and no visible withdrawal from the ridges. Just silence again. Mid-morning, I took a small element farther north than we had gone since arriving. We moved slowly, every step deliberate. About 2 ridges out, we confirmed something new. A forward-listening post position closer to our sector than before. Fresh boot prints flattened vegetation, and a shallow trench not yet reinforced. They are inching forward. We did not engage. We withdrew quietly and adjusted our own, listening posts slightly west to avoid being bracketed. In the afternoon, clouds thickened overhead. Air support was limited today. Only one Royal Lao T-28 aircraft passed high above without engaging. If weather continues like this, the enemy will have more freedom to move during daylight. One of my squad leaders asked me directly today, "Do you think they're preparing for a large assault soon?" I told him no, not yet. This is still preparation. They are building depth, stockpiling ammunition, and testing responses. When they attack, it will not be scattered. It will be coordinated across sectors. 14 days here, and the valley feels different from the day we arrived. It no longer feels like a forward blocking position. It feels like a fixed point being studied from every angle. Tonight, the wind carries distant murmurs again, but not close enough to see. The circle is tightening, not with speed, but with certainty. Day 15. The morning broke with low clouds hanging heavy over the valley. Visibility was poor, the kind that hides movement and swallows sound. Just before dawn, mortar fire began again, this time more sustained than previous days. Not a full bombardment, but steady enough to keep heads down in the Royal Lao camp below. Through the mist, I saw flashes from at least 2 separate ridges north of us. The spacing between impacts in the valley suggests coordination between multiple mortar sections. They are no longer experimenting. They know their range now. The Royal Lao artillery answered with intensity, but the fog limited observation. Shells struck tree lines and slopes, tearing through foliage, yet I could not see clear damage to the enemy's dug positions. Their bunkers are reinforced and angled well. They built them carefully. Mid-morning, we received our first direct harassment on this ridge. 2 mortar rounds landed downslope from our eastern squad position, closer than before. The rounds were not precise, but they were not random either. They are beginning to bracket the high ground. I immediately shifted that squad 20 meters west into a pre-dug secondary position. We move before patterns are established. If they begin registering our ridge, we cannot stay predictable. Around noon, one of our scouts observed something troubling. A larger movement along the northern tree line. At least 30 men moving in staggered files before disappearing into prepared trenches. That is more than a patrol. I reported it by radio. The reply from the valley was strained but composed. They acknowledged increased activity across multiple sectors. In the afternoon, rifle fire erupted briefly from the southwest perimeter of the Royal Lao camp. This exchange lasted longer than previous probes, perhaps 10 minutes. We could hear automatic fire in controlled bursts. When it ended, smoke drifted above the tree line. The men sensed the escalation. No one speaks of leaving, and no one speaks of victory either. We are in the middle phase now, the tightening phase. The enemy has committed to the siege, but the main assault has not yet begun. Before dusk, I walked the perimeter again, checking fields of fire, ensuring ammunition is dry and distributed evenly. The younger soldiers watch the northern ridges more than they used to. They understand now that this battle will not be decided quickly. 15 days in, and the valley feels smaller. The North Vietnamese now occupy nearly every surrounding height and strength, and we are holding one of the last ridges not yet tested fully. Day 16. The air felt heavier this morning, thick with low clouds pressing down on the ridges. Before first light, the mortars began again, sharper and more deliberate than yesterday. This time the pattern was different. Instead of walking across the valley floor, the rounds concentrated briefly on one sector, paused, then shifted to another. They are practicing coordinated fire shifts. The Royal Lao artillery responded almost immediately, but the rhythm felt uneven. A few guns fired rapidly, then others lagged behind. Communication is being strained. From our ridge, we remained untouched during the first barrage, but we could see the smoke rising in multiple columns below. The valley looked unsettled now. Men running in shorter bursts between cover, fewer visible movements overall. After sunrise, we extended observation northward again. We found more reinforcement work completed overnight. Trenches deepened, overhead cover thickened. One position now appears connected by a narrow zigzag trench to another bunker 30 meters away. That means they can move under fire. This is no longer preparation for harassment. This is preparation for a sustained offensive. Around mid-morning, we had another close contact. A small North Vietnamese element moved along the lower slope beneath our eastern flank. They were within clear sight, perhaps 40 meters below us. My men held their breath. We did not fire and let the element pass without noticing our exact position, and it confirms they are comfortable operating near us. At midday, a resupply aircraft attempted to drop into the valley, but had to circle twice before releasing cargo. The cloud cover is unpredictable, and if the weather worsens, resupply will become more dangerous and less accurate. In the afternoon, we heard heavier weapon fire from the northern sector. Not mortars this time, but something with a deeper report, possibly recoilless rifles being tested or repositioned. The sound carried farther than rifle fire, echoing off the valley walls. The men heard it too. No one asked what it was. They already know heavier weapons mean escalation. Late in the day, one of the Royal Lao liaison officers climbed up briefly. His face looked more drawn than before. He said higher command believes the enemy may attempt to isolate outer ridges before launching a larger coordinated assault, but he did not say when. After he left, I gathered my squad leaders and quietly reviewed fallback routes again. That if our ridge is struck heavily, we withdraw in stages, maintaining observation but never allowing ourselves to be surrounded. 16 days in, and the pattern is undeniable now, with mortars more accurate, positions reinforced and connected, along with larger enemy movements in daylight, with now heavier weapons being introduced. The valley below still holds, but it feels less like a strong point and more like a target that has already been measured from every angle. Tonight, the jungle is not silent. It hums with preparation. Day 17. 17 days on this ridge, and this morning felt different the moment I opened my eyes. No mortars before dawn, no probing rifle fire, just a low wind moving through the trees and the distant murmur of the valley below. At first light, visibility was clearer than it has been in nearly a week. The clouds lifted enough to expose the northern ridgeline sharply, and for the first time, I could clearly see the pattern of their work. It is no longer scattered positions, it is a system. Bunkers staggered along slopes, trenches connecting firing points, mortar pits slightly recessed behind forward lines. Around 7 o'clock, the mortars resumed, but lighter than previous days. A handful of rounds landed near the western edge of the Royal Lao perimeter, followed by a pause. Then 2 more near the artillery pits. It felt less like destruction and more like pressure. The Royal Lao guns answered quickly, but not with the heavy volume of earlier days. Ammunition conservation, perhaps. Mid-morning, one of our forward scouts reported something we have not seen before. Enemy soldiers digging facing south, toward the valley, but also angled slightly toward our ridge. That means they're preparing for crossfire, not just direct fire into the valley. They're planning overlapping arcs. Around noon, we heard a heavier detonation from the northern slope, a deep concussive blast. possibly a test firing of a recoilless rifle or heavier support weapon. Moments later, smoke drifted upward from a different sector than usual. They are shifting assets. In the afternoon, we experienced another close encounter on this ridge. A small enemy patrol, likely probing, moved within 50 meters of our western listening post. One of my men nearly fired, but I signaled hold. They paused, scanned, then withdrew. They were not trying to fight. They were measuring. They want to know exactly where we are before they commit force. The men feel it now. The quiet discipline in their movements tells me they understand what comes next will not be slow pressure. It will be coordinated and heavy. Late in the day, I observed fewer visible movements in the valley below. Most Royal Lao soldiers remain under cover. The artillery crews still operate, but there is less visible confidence. They know they're being studied as carefully as we are. 17 days in, and the siege has matured. This is no longer preparation. It is positioning. The mountains around us now belong more to the enemy than to the valley force. And when they decide the timing is right, they will not test. They will strike. Day 18. Before dawn, the mortars began again, but in a pattern I have not heard before. Instead of striking one area repeatedly, the rounds landed in sequence around the valley. West, then center, then east, almost as if drawing a perimeter with explosions. They are rehearsing fire coordination across sectors. The Royal Lao artillery answered quickly, but the volume was even lighter today than yesterday. From our vantage point, I could see smoke hanging over multiple ridges at once. The battlefield is no longer quiet between salvos. After sunrise, I took a small element to observe the northern saddle again. What we saw confirmed everything. The enemy has deepened their trench lines significantly. Some positions now appear almost permanent, reinforced overhead, walls compacted and shaped. These are not temporary fighting holes. They are siege fortifications. We also observed more movement than usual. Groups of 10 to 15 soldiers rotating in and out of positions, not rushed, but organized. That suggests fresh troops cycling in while others rest. Their manpower seems steady, perhaps increasing. Around mid-morning, a mortar round landed close enough to our ridge to shake soil loose from our trench walls. It impacted below our eastern flank, perhaps 50 meters downslope. That is the closest yet. They are refining elevation. I ordered immediate adjustment of positions again, shifting our eastern squad slightly back and higher. We cannot let them bracket us through repeated ranging. At midday, we heard heavy detonations from the southern side of the valley, deeper than mortar impacts. Possibly recoilless rifles being fired against suspected artillery positions. Smoke rose briefly, then dissipated. The Royal Lao response was slower this time. In the afternoon, one of our scouts returned with troubling information. He reported fresh cut vegetation along a previously unused approach to our ridge, a path too narrow for large movement before. They are improving access routes quietly. The men are steady, but the atmosphere has changed. Earlier days carried uncertainty. Now there is clarity. We all understand this is building towards something deliberate and coordinated. The valley below still holds its ground. The artillery still fires. The perimeter remains intact, but the high ground, nearly all of it, now belongs to the North Vietnamese Army. 18 days in, and the siege feels complete in structure. Tonight, the jungle carries steady movement again. They are readying themselves, and soon, the testing will end. Day 19. The morning began without mortars, and that alone told me something was changing. Instead of explosions, we heard movement, more than usual. Not careless movement, but sustained shifting across multiple ridges. Through the clear morning air, I could see figures along 3 separate northern slopes at once. They were not probing. They were adjusting positions in daylight. Around 8 o'clock, the first rounds of the day landed, heavier than before and more concentrated. Mortars struck the western Royal Lao sector repeatedly, not walking fire, but holding it in one area. Smoke rose thick and dark. I could see men scrambling between bunkers. Then, for the first time since we arrived, I heard sustained, automatic fire from inside the valley. Not brief probing bursts, but sustained engagement. It lasted perhaps 7 minutes before tapering off. This is the first real pressure. From our ridge, We scanned constantly for flanking movement. Around mid-morning, one of our scouts reported a small North Vietnamese element moving cautiously along the lower eastern approach, closer than previous days. We watched them carefully. They paused twice, scanning upward, as if aware we were nearby. At midday, the Royal Lao artillery fired heavily again, but I noticed something different. The firing intervals were longer between salvos. That suggests either coordination strain or ammunition management. In the afternoon, we heard the deeper report of heavier weapons again, likely recoilless rifles. One detonation echoed sharply from the northern ridge, and seconds later a plume of smoke rose near the valley artillery area. The response from the valley came quickly, but the rhythm felt uneven. The men are no longer guessing what is happening. They know this siege is entering a new stage. The enemy is not merely encircling. They are rehearsing sectors for coordinated assault. Before dusk, I gathered the squad leaders and spoke plainly. We must assume that outer ridges like ours may be tested more directly in the coming days. Our role remains the same: observe, delay, withdraw if necessary. But we must not be surprised. 19 days in, and the valley no longer feels like a forward strongpoint. It feels like a position being tightened slowly by hands that are patient and disciplined. The jungle tonight is active, not loud, but alive with movement. Equipment being shifted and earth being turned. They are not testing anymore. They are aligning, and alignment means preparation is nearly complete. Day 20. The morning began with the heaviest coordinated mortar fire we have seen so far. It started before dawn, not scattered, not probing. A concentrated barrage struck the western Royal Lao perimeter for nearly 15 minutes. Impacts overlapped, some landing almost on top of one another. This was not testing, this was suppression. The Royal Lao artillery answered with force, but their return fire came in uneven bursts. Some guns fired rapidly, others paused too long between rounds. From our ridge, we remained untouched during the first wave. But as daylight grew stronger, 2 mortar rounds landed along the slope beneath our western flank, closer than ever before, with soil and fragments obstructing our trench walls. No casualties, but the message was clear: they know where we are. Mid-morning, we observed something significant. Larger enemy elements moving between trench systems in coordinated fashion, not hurried, not cautious, as if rehearsing movement under fire. I counted at least 40 men shifting across 2 ridges in intervals. That is no longer reconnaissance strength. That is assault strength being staged. Around noon, heavier detonations echoed from the northern ridge again. Deeper concussions followed by visible impacts near the Royal Lao artillery pits. One explosion produced a thick column of smoke that lingered longer than usual. We could not see exact damage, but the effect on morale below was visible, with movement slowed after that strike. In the afternoon, the Royal Lao liaison officer climbed up briefly, his uniform dusted with soil. He spoke less than before. He said enemy forces appear stronger in every sector, and that command expects increased pressure through the end of the month. He did not speak of withdrawal, nor did he not speak of victory, just speaking of holding. After he left, I walked our line carefully. Ammunition remains steady, food is sufficient, morale is firm, but quiet. No one underestimates the enemy now. 20 days in, and the transformation is complete. When we arrived, the valley felt like a forward position under watch. Now it feels like a position fully encircled by prepared, disciplined forces who have measured every slope and calculated every angle. The North Vietnamese Army own nearly every ridge around Nam Bac, and we hold one of the few that remains contested. The mortars have grown heavier, the enemy movements larger, and the confidence of the enemy more visible. This is no longer the beginning of a siege. It is the end of its preparation phase, and what follows preparation in war is never gentle.